the Guy Jeans podcast.
This next guest of mine, Rich Tauber, man, he's the coolest dude ever. He has been a professional angler, fishing guide, public speaker, and promoter his entire adult life. In fact, he has never had a real job and is very proud of that. His only gainful employment has come from fishing and the outdoor industry. His fishing career started in the early 70s. In his rookie season as a professional angler, he won the Western Bass Angler of the Year, nudging out Hall of Famer Dee Thomas for the title, and is still the youngest fisherman in history to ever win that title. Consequently, 4 years later, he won the largest organized fishing event in the world, the U.S. Open. To this day, he is still the youngest U.S. Open champion ever. In 1986, he became a full-time tour angler with the Bassmasters on ESPN. As a professional, he has qualified for the Super Bowl of angling, the Bassmaster Classic, 2 times. And you guys know I'm a green fish bass fly fishing maniac. I love fishing for bass. And so who better to have on the show as a Rich Tauber, the OG of the bass world. So without further ado, here's Rich. Hey, you guys, it's Guy Jeans. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with one of the OGs of the bass fishing world, Rich Tauber. How you doing, bud?
Very good, Guy. It's so good to be here.
Thanks.
We only get to see each other like once a year.
Yeah.
So, that's what it sort of worked out.
I'm going fishing with you this year.
Hopefully you're going fishing with me this year.
Absolutely.
But, I couldn't miss it when you asked me to show up. So I don't show up early for too many things the week of the Hall show, but I will for you.
So those people out there that don't know who you are, who is Rich Tauber?
Well, I fished for a living my entire life. A former U.S. Open champion. I won the tournament when I was 24 years old. I was the highest paid winner in the history of fishing at that time. But that's kind of like the NFL or an NBA. You know, what was the highest salary back then in 1982 is not the case today. And
weren't you the youngest too?
I still have the record as the youngest. I fished 36 U.S. Opens, which is still a record. Stuff like that. But
Wow.
I retired from pro fishing full time about 4 years ago, and now obviously run my business, Rich Tauber Fishing, which is a charter service. Mm-hmm. For all of Southern California. I would say all the way from San Diego to the Delta up in Northern California. And then we also do saltwater trips, mostly Channel Islands. Mm-hmm. And fishing calico bass, barracuda, bonita, yellowtail, stuff like that. One-day trip. So when I first started, I just didn't know that charter business would be that big. I actually thought, Guy, there would be 100 or 120 trips a year, which is you can handle, but we do close to 450
Dang.
A year, and a lot of those are these little half-day trips with the dad and the 2 kids in 4 hours, and so we'll do 2 or 3 of those a day, many days.
Awesome,
yeah.
man. And so you have some guides working for you, and
like your business, you got to
Yeah.
have good people helping you, and I have 2 really good ones. Another U.S. Open champion, Rusty Brown, he helps me. And then I have a longtime pro angler, Steve Morris, who fished with me during my days with the Bassmasters on ESPN. He was a pro angler, and he handles Casitas and Kachuma both.
Did you grow up in Santa Barbara or Ventura?
No, the Valley.
Yeah. In the Valley?
I went to Taft High School in Woodland Hills.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, and I moved to California when I was about 3 or 4 years old, so I have no real recollection of Chicago where I was born. But I fished out of there and then moved to Camarillo, a little closer to the lake, in 2003.
Okay. And so is that where you first got your first fishing experience up in that zone?
The first time I went fishing, believe it or not, you'll love to hear this. I caught a trout at Irvine Lake. That was the first fish I ever caught. I was probably 8, and it was over. Probably like you. I mean, I was toasted.
Totally.
Yeah, there was no other options for me in life, and I was completely. And what I remember distinctly was that when I went, I knew I was going to make a living fishing, but I always thought I'd be broke. You know, I thought I would like have an apartment. You know, you're young, like with 2 other guys, and we'd share it, and I'd sell lures or do something. I had no clue, probably like you, that it would be this huge thing, and you know, there'd be houses and cars and boats involved and all this. I had no idea that bass fishing in particular would get that big. So pretty taken aback by it. You've
been, from what I can do with my calculator, you've been guiding for over 30 years.
Yeah, well,
is that right?
I've been pro fishing. My full-time job from the time I was 20 to 50 years old, 30 years, was fishing on tour with the Bassmasters on ESPN. Okay. And people still see it to this day on the weekends. That was my job. I would guide occasionally. You know what I mean? When I come home, you used to have the answer machine, and I'd listen to the machine, and there'd be some guy, and that sounds like a nice enough guide. Yeah. Between tour stops, I would take him. But full-time, doing what you and I do, 2009 is when my website went up, but I have been guiding since 1977.
Yeah. And you're still doing it, and are you going to keep doing it for a while?
Like you, it's the physicality of it. And I think all captains, you look at these saltwater captains and everything, it's just how many times can you get up? Do your knees hold up? Do your hips hold up? Your balance? I'm 66 almost. I'll be 66 in November. And we're both pretty lucky physically, you know. Your weight, your knees, it has a big thing. It's a big part of it. And I physically can still do it. So I'm probably going to be doing it until, as long as God lets me move around, I'm probably going to chug along here for a while.
What are the lakes that you guide on in the area?
I do almost exclusively Lake Casitas, Ventura. Okay. I have 3 boats, but one of them's tagged into Casitas, and you know, with quagga you can't move them.
That's what I was going to ask you about too.
And so that's it for me. And then my saltwater boat, we can go anywhere, of course. You don't have that problem, but we primarily focus on the Channel Islands. And that's the extent of my travel. You know, when I fish with the Bassmasters, it's all about airplanes and locating your boat in Florida, Georgia, New York. And I've traveled the entire country for 30 years, and I never wanted to see another plane again, because that's the only way you can do it. It's like the PGA Tour. It's every couple of weeks you're back at it in another location, and you have to get the boat there somehow, and you need to compete. You're always gone. You're never home. So it's a tough life. I mean, I really loved it, but I enjoy being home now.
The pressure, I'm going to talk about that real quick and then get back to the lakes, but as a touring angler, is there, because you have sponsors, right? And so there's a big pressure on you guys, right? Like when, you know, to win and keep your sponsors and that sort of thing. Is that true?
Very true.
Yeah.
And
because you can get dropped.
I've been let go. You mean just like an NFL player? You know, you'll get up one day and you're traded from the New York Giants to the the Eagles or somebody, and you're upset by it, you know, and you're disappointed, and it gives you a little oomph to go out and prove them wrong. But my big thing, you know, I made a few of these Bassmaster Classics, which is basically our Super Bowl. But my big thing was, before the internet, public speaking was huge. Seminars were big money. That was YouTube before YouTube. Yeah. And they pay you a fee to speak, and I did a lot. And I made a lot of money as a public speaker, and also my sponsors kept me, because even if I didn't win, I was in front of so many people, they would continue to pay me. And on the Bassmasters, what's different is we don't have sponsors unless they pay us. We don't. You can give me a whole bunch of stuff for free. We don't do that at that level. You have to do that and pay me. So that's when you watch these guys on TV. That's the difference from what you might call a smaller thing, where if somebody gave you a dozen fishing rods and reels, you would call them a sponsor. We don't do that. So it's quite a bit different. Obviously, I'm not involved on tour any longer, so I don't do that. But that is the way that it works, is those guys are paid to use those products.
And who was your biggest sponsor?
Well, I had 4 big ones. I had DuPont, Brunswick, Coleman. I drove Oakley's corporate boat for many years. when they were small, I started out with them. Jim Gennard started the company. They were a little place. They were actually in a strip mall.
Awesome, man.
With pedicure thing next door, and cleaners is on the other side. Now they're in the monster building. But DuPont owned Stren, so I was with them, and then Brunswick owned Mercury, and Coleman, they owned my boat company, which was Skeeter at the time. So that's the way that it works, and it's. But I always tell people, they say, "Well, they give you these boats." I say, "Well, yeah, they do, but believe me, it's not free, because what they do is they tell you, you give them 10 days, let's say, in the contract, or you give them 15. When they say you're going to Miami Boat Show, you're going to Miami Boat Show. I don't care what your plans are, and if you don't, you broke the contract. And so you work for that boat. Now, we don't pay for the boats and the motors, but believe me, you work. Because you're flying out of LAX, and you're going across the country, and you're da-da-da, and then you got to go back, and you don't see your significant other for 7-8 days. It's not a playground at all. I'm very happy to watch it on TV now and not have to participate.
Yeah. So going back to the lakes, Casitas, and we were talking a little bit about this earlier, and all the water that's coming into Casitas and how it's changed. I was there in December just hanging out, camping and stuff, and I couldn't believe how low it was. Right. Then we started getting rain and stuff, but from the time I saw it in December till now, I haven't seen it, but just from your information, it sounds like it's filled up to 60% or something.
You wouldn't even recognize the guy.
And so, what does that do to the bass in that situation?
Well, you were showing me videos of Kern River, during the storm, which blew my mind. And I know your guys caught fish yesterday. I saw, and they're out there working, and it's good now. But it's when we call high water we call it on tour. It's in the woods. That's a slang bass fishing term. You can use it in trout. I won't say I own that term.
In the woods.
In the woods. That's a southern thing. It's that's how you know it's high. It's in the woods. You're in somebody's backyard. You're fishing, swing sets and fireplaces in someone's backyard, and next to a swimming pool, and you're saying hi to people while they're in their living room. And a lot of lakes in the south, as we all see on CNN, they flood, these massive floods, and the tournaments are scheduled so they don't cancel them, so we have to fish through it.
Sure.
I have never in my life had a good fishing day in the woods. Anywhere I've ever been. I mean, Florida, Georgia, and I told my guides when this happened, get ready. Because it's never ever good. I've never heard of a guy kill him in the woods. I've never, going through, it's never good. And I know in trout fishing it isn't either. I mean, when it just goes into people's yards and into people's farms, where are these trout going to be? So very, very difficult. But it's starting to stabilize. I know this show will come out in April, and by then it should be very nice and stable and warm, and I think it'll be pretty good. But I do not expect to have a tremendous year, because it's still a lot of cover. There's over 70 vertical feet of trees in Lake Casitas that have been growing for about 8 years now, because it was last full in 2012. And so it was probably pretty stable, dropping a little. So let's call it 8-9 years of dryness. And then at Kachuma, there's over 100 vertical feet of trees. So there is a lot of stuff down there for them to hide. They're at a tremendous advantage. So yes, it will be beautiful. Yes, the experiences will be green. The flowers you're going to see, as we both know, on the bank, and the greenery and the beautiful river you're going to fish. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be one of those years. That's the way I've always experienced it. And once it drops a little bit, maybe next year, and kind of settles in, things will get probably better. But that would be my projection, for the year.
Yeah, there's got to be so much cover under there. And I guess in the long run, too, that cover is good for the little guys, right? And then that just gets the fishery better.
It's going to be wonderful for the spawn. I mean, there's already fish that have already spawned that we never harassed them. We didn't see them. We don't know about it. We can't get to them. And So for the fishing industry and for the fish, huge win. For the angler, a mediocre win, we'll call it. You know, it's going to be pretty, but people are going to have to probably get used to a few less fish than they caught before. And then, the other one for us is hooking them's one thing. How do you get them through all of this stuff? Right? Yeah. And there's timber and trees and driftwood and it's just so much stuff in the water. And bass fishing, you know, we fish in that cover. Our ratio might be landing 4 out of 10 hookups. So,
what kind of bass are in Casitas?
They're Florida strain largemouth. We don't have any smallmouth bass.
Okay. So what happens to those guys in the cold winter time? Are they down deep?
Well, the big thing probably your listeners will appreciate is I'll use marlin as an example. Okay. You have striped marlin and you have blue marlin. Okay? Anybody that's a fisherman, they made the movie, the Old Man in the Sea was done about a blue marlin. It wasn't done about a striper, okay? The blue marlin is a completely different species than a striped marlin. They might look a little bit alike, but boy, when you hook one, that's two different worlds. And largemouth bass is the same. You have northern strain bass and you have Florida strain bass. Northern strain bass are pretty simple going creatures. They'll run around and they'll participate pretty much all the time. Florida bass, unless they get exactly what they want, they are not biting. And that's why they get so big. They're super temperamental. They like the temperature their way. And if they don't get it, I'm going to chill out for a few days. A northern bass, you throw your bait in front of them, that looks kind of good. They'll run out there and grab your crankbait. So that's why Casitas is such a tough lake, is that it has Florida strain bass. Lake Cachuma in Santa Barbara, those are northern strain bass. You're going to catch more fish. They're going to be smaller. They're a smaller breed of bass. They get smaller. The biggest northern bass ever caught is probably about 14 pounds or 15 pounds. They just don't get as big as Florida's. So I know you can relate that to the trout world. There's different species, a lot of trout, a lot of different types, and they all have their
characteristics. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to you go to Pyramid, or you have guys that go to Pyramid. Pyramid coming down the 5 to the show here look nice and dark and muddy and kind of messed up and everything. So they have striper in there and smallmouth, and do they have Florida strain in there as well? Or?
No, they're northern strain bass, but they have smallmouth bass there, so that's cool. So does Cachuma have smallmouth bass, and then Castaic is Florida strain bass. That's once again you get back into the. That's why Casitas and Castaic have those big 20-pound lake records that are so famous and still in the top 25 of all-time biggest fish ever caught. You know, they're still nationally or worldwide ranked. You know.
What about you guys? Do stripers too?
Yeah, we fish striped bass and of course a lot of crappie fishing. We have a huge base of crappie fishermen. We do a lot of fly trips, which we'll talk about, but we do a lot of fly trips with our clients. Most of our bass fishing with the fly is done sight fishing. Okay. You know, which you guys do in the trout business. And we look at them catch and release. But a streamer clouser has always been one of our best weapons. And just like a 7/8 weight rod, a 7 is fine. And a lot of the guys catch them with a floating line with a fluorocarbon leader, because then that streamer, if it has a little weight, or that clouser has a little bit of weight in the head, it sort of it falls down softly into that 2.5 foot level where that bass is hiding. We can see him with our eyes, and you're tormenting him or teasing him or casting at him that are actively eating. And that's a really good way to fly fish for bass, is with usually it's a chartreuse and white one, guy. We use something bright we can see, and the chartreuse and white kind of gives you that shad look too.
You know, how cool is it that you have all those different lakes that you can go to, and if one lake's not producing, you can go in another one with your clients, right?
Yeah, and one of our guides, our guide Rusty Brown, he's a traveler, meaning that he's not tagged into a lake. he goes to lakes that allow inspection the day you get there. And if you fish there multiple days, you can use your inspection. Like if you go to Castaic Lake and you and I go fishing in your boat, we go fishing. We can keep going there every single day as long as we want because we have the pass. We passed for their lake, and then but he'll travel go to a lake and. In, like, for instance, San Diego, there is no passes. They don't even inspect you there. They just don't care about the zebra mussel situation. And then other lakes, he'll go, and then he spends a few hours drying the boat out, getting it ready. And so he's what we call a traveler.
Okay. So you also do saltwater trips to the islands. And what's that like? What do you guys do?
It's really fun. I fish in a 22-foot center console. It's a Ranger Bahia.
It's a nice boat, man. I saw a picture of it.
It's real popular. Lots of guys like it because you can get into super shallow water with it, and it's really good for 2 to 3 people. I don't take more than 3 almost ever. If I have 2 dads and 2 kids, but that's like straight up and down style fishing. But if you want to fly fish or cast and fish those shallow calico bass and what we call boiler rocks, up in the whitewater, we recommend 2, maximum of 3. And fly works real good.
Yeah, I want to go do that. That's what I want to do with you, is go out there and do that.
Yeah.
Sinking line,
Yeah.
And some calico bass flies for sure.
Yes.
And what else can you get out there when you go out on a trip with you?
We fish a lot of barracuda and bonita too.
Awesome, man.
We've never had a guy catch a yellowtail yet. But hopefully, they haven't really been around very good the last few years, but we did catch a lot of barracuda and bonita, which are, as you know, really fun on a fly rod.
Yeah.
And once again, any of your large, bright colored streamers and something you can cast as far as you can helps. I was telling you how, I sort of click the boat and gear a little bit, and I'll what we call stretch it for you, and get it back a little bit for you. But it's a lot of fun. And then the bass fishing, you don't really need my help if you're a good caster. You can get it in there plenty far enough. But sometimes those. Surface fish, when they're boiling, they'll be a little touchy, and they want you not to be too close sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes they bust right on the boat.
Yeah.
But that makes it fun. I always recommend the fly guys come out when it's summer, because we'll run into a big school of barracuda, and I know they might not want to keep one to eat or just keep one to eat or something, but the catch and release. And I fillet everything, surprisingly, like bonita salads become like a hot deal on the sport boats to serve. I mean, stuff that we didn't used to eat when you and I were growing up has now become cool.
Yeah. So you get your boat up to pretty close to the rocks, and you cast, and then you just let it drop. And sometimes are those fish down deep, like in the 20-foot range, or are they all kind of in the 10-foot range?
They do get in that range, but I don't fish for them that much.
Yeah, okay.
I go where there's enough surge where, they're gonna use that. And then number 2, I don't, I was telling you a couple days ago, I always have the boat running. It's a 4-stroke and it's quiet, but you can't use a trolling motor because you're too shallow, and if there's a big wave came or something, you need to always be. So I am at the wheel at all times, 100%. I never make a cast. I run the boat, and like we're talking, much like a guy fishing bonefish, somebody's got to push the pole. Somebody has to position the boat, and you have to have that to fish this way. So that's why a lot of people don't do it, because somebody gets, if you're a private boater, you get stuck not fishing all day.
Yeah.
You took out these guys, your buddies, and you didn't get to make a cast.
Yeah.
Well, I'm being paid, so I don't expect to make a cast. So it's all good. So that's why a lot of guys go with me, because they don't ever get a chance to do it, because nobody wants to run the boat. And the boat, too, is really smooth and flat. It's your typical bay boat.
Yeah.
And so your fly line being laying all over the deck is nothing. I mean, almost never do my guys get messed up in that boat. It's really easy to cast from.
Yeah. What's the conditions that you look for most when you're going to cross that channel?
Well, I don't go if I don't like anything about it bothers me. I just don't go.
Yeah.
When I first started, I was much more courageous, but I've learned. And I also have befriended 2 other very, very good captains, and they have really educated me. Because you got to remember, I'm a 50-something year vet of freshwater fishing.
Yeah.
I'm about a 7-year vet of saltwater, so I'm a rookie.
Yeah.
In comparison to some of these guys I talked to, they did what I did, but in saltwater. They started when they were 18. Ran boats. They have charter boats too. One of them is the Calico Hunter, which is a very good service. Great friend of mine. He's in Camarillo, and so these captains have helped me a lot. And now I just cancel the trip. Now what I have the liberty of doing, which is great, is because if you took the day off and Mother Nature won't let us go, we'll take you freshwater fishing.
Okay, yeah.
Follow me? So at least if you have scheduled, or the kids came from out of town, or you flew in from Detroit, and you get hosed on the the saltwater program. Yeah, and we have to cancel, Guy, I would say 60-something% of our trips.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's probably closer to 70.
You know, because I used to go surfing on the backside of the Santa Cruz, Mar Meadows there, and it was awesome. And we'd sometimes, be glass going across.
Right.
And then in the evening, coming back, like, holy cow. And that's scary, man. Right?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And I pretty much look at the same 3 websites that other guys are looking at. NOAA, Windy, different ones. And if I don't like it, we ain't going. Because I've had guys kiss the ground when I first started. Yeah. When we hit the dock, like, thank goodness. And it is. And what's interesting about it, guys, I don't care unless you're over about 40 feet of boat, a 40-footer or bigger. You're going to take it either way, in a 22-footer or a 26-footer. Yeah. It's not really the size of the boat until you get up to like those bigger boats, like a small sport fisher. Yeah, yeah. Which a little sport fisher, like you know what I mean. They're 55 feet. Okay, so. Yeah, it makes it easy for me. It's like nobody's going to go. I mean, it's either you can go or you can't go. It's pretty darn simple. I will tell you that when it's nice out there, as you know, it's the most beautiful place in the world. Yeah. When you were surfing there and stuff, and you're coming home after that, you just feel like $1 million. Right. And I've been out in the middle of the channel, out in the shipping channel, and it looks like Lake Casitas out there, and you're like, is it get nicer than this? Right. And then those nasty days, I stay away from them.
Have you ever fished that island that goes out by La Conchita, with all those rocks? No. Oh, I've always wanted to go out there and check that out, You know what I'm talking about? Yep. Yeah. So what is the RTF Tour?
Well, it's just Rich Tauber fishing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's like a bass tournament?
Yeah, I have bass tournaments at Lake Casitas. I've done daytime tournaments, nighttime tournaments, just little small tournaments for the guys.
That's cool.
We used to, when we first started, we had a lot more guys at the lake, but I think as the tagging thing got harder and harder, and more people left, and so we don't have as many, you don't see as many teams fishing anymore. But yeah, that's what it is. It's the Rich Tauber Fishing Tour, just an extension of my business. And their team tournaments were 2 guys as buddies fish, and they pay $150 each, and a couple $1,000s to the winner, and they have a lot of fun. They start lying to each other instantly when they meet, and it never stops. And so it's just a little fun, what we call in the industry a buddy tournament.
It looks like you guys are fishing at night.
Fish at night.
Is that a full moon? You guys are doing it?
Yeah, usually a full moon. I pay the lake a fee to rent the lake for the night. And that's how it works. It's closed. Cool. It's closed to the public, so it'd be like me renting Staples Center for my kids to play basketball after a Clipper game. But that's what you're in essence doing. I pay the lake, and then I add that fee to the entry fee, so the guys understand that. I'm buying the lake so you can go fishing.
Do the bass seem to be biting pretty good in the full moon?
But night fishing is a complete cult thing. There's guys, I've done it 4 times in my life, and I had a terrible experience every time. And I really struggled with, how could you love fishing that and hate night fishing? And it took me years, but it's because I'm very visual.
Yeah.
And if you're a visual angler, and there's a lot of trout fishermen, your customers that are visual fishermen,
Sure.
they see that shadow behind that rock and like, that's the turn on.
Yeah.
You know, and when night fishing, there's no visual. Okay, it's just the strike you feel and the fight, and that does nothing for me. So there's guys that show up for night tournaments that want nothing to do with daytime, and there's daytime guys that never ever fish with me ever. They have zero interest in it, and they find it the same way I do. I own the tournaments. I own the lake actually for that night, and I don't even go, not even for fun. And I got the permit. You know? I just tried it, and I didn't know why I didn't like it, and that's what I don't like not being able to see. And there's a grebe on the bank, so there's probably some shad right there, and there's a heron standing there.
Yeah.
And it's just all the visual things that you and I do.
So what about top water in the moonlight?
Very good, especially right before dark, because we take off before the sun goes down, about an hour. And so you get like that last hour when, you know, right before the lake, goes black. Those guys, they catch a lot of them then.
Okay.
And then I bring them back at midnight.
So I was fishing Lake Casitas, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I went up to that area where the creek comes in over there. I don't know the name of it.
The Santa Ana Creek.
Yeah, and I was by myself, and I rented a boat, and I just wanted to go fishing, right? And it's super hard. It's super hard to fish with by yourself, you know, because you can't. The wind blows you all over the place or whatever. Right. You know, with one of those rental boats, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm getting blown all over the place, you know, whatever. But I ended up going back in there in that zone, and I had a big old rat, like a deer hair rat. And I threw that thing, and I'm pulling across, and I didn't catch the fish, but this big bass came up and looked at it and just stared at it for a second and then disappeared back into the depths, you know. But I'm like, oh, they got to eat that stuff, man.
Yeah.
Right? How cool is that, huh?
Oh, yeah, well, they're naturally super curious.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of fish like that, are just curious fish. And I know divers see them all the time. There's some fish just like to swim up to you. Yeah. Bass are that way, you know. He definitely wanted to know if it was a rat. And if it was, he was going to eat it. He just figured out, I'm not sure that's a rat. That looks a little off.
What's the biggest bass you've seen come out of Casitas?
Well, the lake record, I guess, is 21 pounds, 4 ounces, something like that. And the world record is 22 pounds, 4 ounces.
Where was that at?
It was Japan, the last one.
Oh, okay.
And I've caught them up to 13 and a half pounds, but many of my friends have caught 16 and 17 and 18 pounders, and they were all caught from about 1988 to 92.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was the zone. And because the DFG was super friendly to lakes and constantly showing up and doing trout plants. We got a lot of small burrito-sized trout, you know, those 9-inchers, 10, which is just a swimming chimichanga to a bass. I mean, you talk, first of all, it's solid protein, okay? They're not that fast. In comparison to some fish out there, trout are not the fastest fish ever birthed, you know what I mean? They're smooth, okay? Yeah. They don't look for any structure. They just swim around, you know, basically doing what they do. And the bass, we didn't know that the bass were eating them when this all started. We thought the bass were on the bottom because Jimmy Houston and Bill Dance, the fishing shows in the 70s and early 80s, that's what they said. They ate spinner baits. They ate and crawdad fishing. Remember, that got really big, using a crawdad on the bottom. But what tipped it off was we started planting the trout, and we started seeing these huge boils. And there's no stripers in the lake. Now and so this is easy. They're feeding on them. And we'd see them get them halfway too and shake them like a shark, you know, where they do the ripping with the head because they're trying to tear it in two because they got one of the bigger trout. And then the guys that were responsible for the first trout bait, which you're putting out some, nobody knows this, but were the saltwater skippers from Channel Islands and Ventura Sport Fishing, because all of those guys on their day off don't want to even hear a seagull. They don't want anything to do with the saltwater. They all freshwater fish, all of them. They don't go back out on their day off and the saltwater.
Yeah.
And they were using a boot tail, which is what we slang for a swim bait. Okay, it looks like a boot, in a way. And they used them for calico bass in different species, but they poured a 9-inch one and poured it in pink, green, and white. And they had a big cadmium hook in it. It was a saltwater hook, because we didn't have any of these super cool owner lead heads with a super cool hook on it yet. And they sold it to the lake, and they put it on a string in that boat rental shop on the back wall. And a guy wrote with a pen, the dinosaur, just with a Marks-a-Lot above it. And that's where the term the dinosaur, which then became named, it was not named. Somebody in the bait shop, probably Randy King, who ran the boat rentals then, wrote that, and that's what started the swim bait. That was the first one, was poured by saltwater people, not freshwater. And we didn't have the rods either, or the reels. They were all salt, because it's so big. So then we started using buying saltwater rods and saltwater reels. And then the industry jumped in and entered the swim bait rod.
Interesting.
Right?
That's good stuff, man.
Yeah, so that was all so no matter what Alan Cole tells you, or Ken Huddleston, and all these people, they're great guys, by the way, fantastic, but they did not discover the trout bait. I was there. That's not how it happened. After that came better looking ones.
Yeah.
And the wooden one, the AC plug by Alan Cole. And then the Huddleston. Boy, that even looks better than the dinosaur, see? So that's how it all started. It was all started by saltwater captains.
Can you run me through just a couple of colors or techniques that you would use on starting in kind of like January and going through the season, just real quick on colors that you would go to on that lake?
For bass fishing.
Yes.
In the winter, it's really, really difficult. Don't ever go winter fishing there and then go home mad at yourself. It's not you.
There's so many people that go there and get frustrated, huh?
In the business you and I are in the charter and education and teaching and being like a golf coach,
Yeah.
And, that's basically what we are, we're golf instructors. And there's what I always say, there's days it's the fish's fault and there's days it's your fault. And I have always used that, and when I always tell people in the winter, it was the fish's fault. It wasn't you.
Yeah.
And then when it's good and you screw it up, it's you. It's your fault. You had, lots of opportunities. So winter is very tough, and browns and purples are your best colors at that lake. And a leadhead jig, fished on the bottom, mimicking a crawdad, is your best winter time bait. Then in the spring, when they get into the bushes, the Senko, which is a Yamamoto bait, 6 inches long, looks like a stick. That's a very subtle, when the water's just getting warm, the fish are not really ready to really get moving, and they see that subtleness and quietness of it sinking. They'll just go over to it slowly and kind of inhale it and move on, and that's a really good bait. And then when we start to see them, we sight fish for bass. They're spawning. It's catch and release. You're mostly aggravating the bass.
Oh, okay.
Aggravating the bass. And then in the summertime, when the metabolism jumps up, now you're going to be using your topwater, your buzz bait, jerk bait, these faster, aggressive styles of fishing. And then in the fall, you revert right back into kind of those, you're getting into winter, so the jig comes out again, a drop shot plastic worm. But brown and purple, you can't go wrong with. And if you're going to not go with me or our crew on a guide trip and you're going to rent a boat, get out there early, like you said, before the wind blows, so that little rental boat doesn't get blown all over. Try to get there first thing in the morning, and usually at 10:30 every day we get the wind, off the ocean.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when you want to return your boat. So if you're going to rent a boat and go out with your family, get out there early when it's nice and calm.
Okay. And then once it starts getting windy, it's kind of like Does the bite just completely shut off?
No, there's still fish to be caught, but you need a trolling motor, and we have all this magnificent stuff and this great innovation called Spot Lock, where we hit one button and the boat, you have a 2,000-pound vessel that's sitting dead still and will not move. It's fantastic. It's the greatest innovation in fishing, and what's great that you can appreciate is, we wear a lanyard, a necklace now, and we used to have to run that foot pedal all day long and sit in the front, and now we can sit behind the steering wheel.
Awesome.
Or I can hang out in the back with the guy that's in the back talking with him, and I'm running it all with my remote in my hand, and it also gets me away from you, meaning you paid to be on an $80,000 bass boat, and now you get the whole deck to yourself, the front. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I don't have to get me in your way.
Right.
And I've been in your way for 40-something years. So that innovation was probably the best guy in my 50 years. The Spot Lock motor. That innovation and a lanyard around your neck.
If people want to go fishing with you, where do they go? What website, and give them your handles and all that.
Okay, Rich Tauber Fishing. Rich, and it's Tauber is T-A-U-B as in boy, E-R. Rich Tauber Fishing. I pretty much own Google, so if they type in, Southern California Bass Guide, they're going to see Rich Tauber Fishing. I don't own a lot of things, but I think I got that one figured out. But Rich Tauber Fishing, and we are open every single day. We do provide all the rods, the reels, the tackle, the baits. The only things that you need is a fishing license if you're 16 years of age or older, and you need foods and drinks that you like. You can bring it in your backpack, or and use our ice chest on board the boat, or you can bring a little ice chest. Those are the only two items you need, and we offer 4-hour trips, which we highly recommend for families. We do a ton of what your dad did with you as a kid and my dad did with me. I got a 7-year-old boy and a 9-year-old boy or girl, and they've never caught a fish. What do I do? That's probably 60% of our business.
Yeah.
It's not hardcore bass fishermen.
Yeah.
They have a boat.
Yeah.
They have their own thing. I get a ton of this show, the saltwater, because saltwater, this is such a big, this Long Beach show, the Bart Hall show is such a saltwater show. But that's great, because those are guys that, it's just like fly fishing. They're coming by your booth, and and they're like, I've heard about it.
Exactly.
I want to try it.
Yeah.
It's the perfect customer for us. So we adore this show, and we call them crossovers. And we're going to get those crossover guys that really don't want a freshwater fish. But you know what? In April, it's windy at sea every day anyway. There ain't nothing going on other than rock fishing. And I'll go bass fishing. And then once the Dorados show up, I don't hear them. They're gone. The tuna show up, they're gone.
Yeah. Well, Rich, thanks so much for being on my podcast, buddy.
Oh, man.
It's a pleasure talking to you, and I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to going fishing with you for those calicos, man. That's my goal this year, is to do that with you.
We're going to do that, and thank you for inviting me. I've always looked up to you, the way you run your business.
Thanks, man.
You're the powerhouse of fly fishing, merchandising, teaching, educating fishermen. So it's, like I said, very rarely I get up early before the show, but I'll do it for you.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, man. You guys, there he is, Rich Tauber. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
It's a Guy Jeans podcast.